35 and 700 BC. And Hosea, Amos, Isaiah, and Jonah were all his contemporaries. And Micah prophesied during the reigns of the three of Judah's kings, Jotham, Ahaz, and Hezekiah. And years later, in the days of Jeremiah, the elders quoting from Micah 3 and 12 argued that King Hezekiah had not put Micah to death. Therefore, the priests, prophets, and people should not put Jeremiah to death either. But Micah's prophecy concerns both Samaria and Jerusalem. Samaria was the capital city of the northern kingdom of Israel, and Jerusalem was the capital city of the southern kingdom of Judah. And the two capital cities represented their countries as a whole, and Micah demonstrated that the southern kingdom was just as sinful as the northern kingdom. And the word of the Lord came to Micah in three segments, each beginning with the command to hear. And Micah reminded God's people that sin leads to discipline, and that God expected his people to do justly and to love mercy and to walk humbly. And judgment for future restoration are the book's major themes, with a message of hope, righteousness, and remnant. And that's going to come later on in the book of Micah. We won't get there today. But it talks about here, and we'll go now into, let's read verse 2 through 7. It says, Hear all you people, hearken, O earth, and all that therein is, and let the Lord God be witness against you, and the Lord from his holy temple. So what he's getting into here is, he's trying to set the theme here, as the lesson talks about. He's setting the theme as it would be a courtroom. It's kind of way the writer of the lesson here talks about it. Says it's like a courtroom, and he's calling the court to order, and this is what he starts out here in verse 2. It says, Hear all you people, hearken, O earth, and all that is therein, and let the Lord God be witness against you for the Lord from his holy temple. And now he goes into verse 3, and this would be a symbolism of what it says. The writer of this lesson says the symbolism of a judge coming to the courtroom. It says, For behold, the Lord cometh forth out of his high place, and will come down and tread upon the high places of the earth. And the mountains shall be molten under him, and the valleys shall be cleft as wax before the fire, and as the waters that are poured down a steep place. For the transgression of Jacob is all this, and for the sins of the house of Israel. What is the transgression of Jacob? Is it not Samaria? And what of the high places of Judah? Are they not Jerusalem? Therefore I will make Samaria as a heap of the field, and as plantings of a vineyard, and I will pour down the stones thereof into the valley, and I will discover the foundations thereof. And all the graven images thereof shall be beaten to pieces, and all the hires thereof shall be burned with fire. And all the idols thereof will I lay desolate, for she gathered it of the hire of a harlot, and they shall return to the hire of a harlot. So Micah was confident that the jurors here would render a guilty verdict after they heard the Lord's testimony. He pictured the Lord as entering the courtroom from his holy temple in heaven, and God's presence was so overwhelming that Micah depicted him as walking from one mountain summit to another, all in a single step. And as a result, the mountaintops melted like wax before the fire, and cascaded and like water poured down a slope. But Micah hinted at God's judgments against the pagan altars and high places that stood on many of the hilltops in Judah. So the northern kingdom in its capital, as we said, was Samaria, and the southern kingdom's capital was Jerusalem. And said they had begun the worship of Baal, and it said Baal was a fertility god, and sometimes included sacred prostitution. And worshippers, here it says, paid the temple official for illicit relations with the temple harlots, and these payments were filled the treasury temple. And Micah foretold that the Assyrians would burn this ill-gotten gain and then use the currency as a payment for their own temple prostitutes. So everything that they were doing was was horrible, as we're going to get into now, is talking about some of the prophets. And you get into having a lot of the kings, a lot of the shows you watch on TV or something, or the movies from back in the old days. They have all of the kings have people that supposed to be wise or whatever to tell them things, and that's kind of true. During this time they had their own prophets, but the prophets wasn't speaking for God. They were speaking for themselves, trying to make the people feel good, and the people were actually paying them to tell them what they wanted to hear. So they were doing real good. But that's what they wasn't really prophets. They were just telling people what they wanted to hear, so you could get away with anything you wanted to, and that's what they had set up for themselves. So they didn't think they were doing anything bad. But Micah here comes and tells them exactly what they're doing wrong. So what verse do we get to? All right, to verse 8. Let's go to verse 8 now. It says, "Therefore I will wail and howl. I will go stripped and naked, and will and make a wailing like the dragons, and mourning as of owls." It says, "For her wound is incurable, for it is come unto Judah. He is come unto the gate of my people, even to Jerusalem. Declare ye it not at Gath, weep ye not at all in the house of Ephraim. Roll thyself in the dust, pass ye away, thou inhabitant of Sephir, having thy name naked, the inhabitant of Zena." Let me just hold up a minute, because this is the part that got me really confused here. All right, so what's going on here is Micah is making a pun here. You know what a pun is? He's using your name like my name. I didn't know this forever. Everybody looks up what their name means. My name Wayne means wagon wheel maker. So it would be like saying Wayne needs to go make a wagon wheel to get out of town. That's kind of what they're saying, and that's kind of what these names here mean. Is he's talking about all these? Because when I read this, I didn't know what in the world he was talking about until I got into what's going on here. And says, and it talks about some of the puns here that was used, and it says, let me find the first one. It says Gath. It says Gath sounds somewhat similar to the first part of the Hebrew word for tell. So I guess that's where Micah, coming from where he come from, was telling these things. And it says Micah called on those who lived in the house of Ephraim, or Beth Ephraim, a village belonging to Judah, to roll themselves in dust. And Ephraim means dust, and rolling in dust and ashes was a visible gesture of extreme sorrow. It says the people of Sephir were to pass by in naked shame. And Micah drew a contrast, because the word sapphire means beautiful, but the village's inhabitants would endure public disgrace. And those who lived in Zanan were not to come from their city walls, because the Syrians would be encamped against them. And Micah again developed a contrast, since Zanan means going out. And Micah referred to the mourning of Bethesda, and Bethesda means house of closeness or nearness, and the commanders of Judah's army would desperately need a place close by to make a defensive stand, but Bethesda would not be the place. And then it goes on down into Marath, and it said Marath means bitterness, and the Marathites would experience the meaning of their town's name, since the disaster would come down from the Lord. And the city of Lachish, it says, was famed for its horses. And it says Lachish sounds somewhat like the Hebrew word for team, and it required a team of horses to pull a speeding chariot. And that's where that one would come from. But let me read this again now, knowing that some of this is a pun or a play on their name. It might make more sense. It says, For her wound is incurable, for it is come unto Judah, and is come into the gate of my people, even to Jerusalem. Declare ye not at Gath. It said, declare ye not. So what do we say about Gath? Gath means to tell. It says, declare ye not at Gath. Weep ye not at all in the house of Aphra. Roll thyself in dust. Pass you away, thou inhabitant of Sapphire, having thy same naked. And it says, the inhabitant of Zanan came forth in the morning of Bethazel, and he shall receive you in his standing. For the inhabitant of Marath waited carefully for good, but evil came down from the Lord unto the gate of Jerusalem. O thou inhabitants of Lachish, bind the chariot to the swift beast. She is beginning of the sin of the daughter of Zion, for the transgressions of Israel were found in thee. Therefore shalt thou give presents to Moresh Gath, the house of Achizib shall be a lie to the kings of Israel. And I think that one does mean lie as well. Achizib means lie. It says, Achizib shall be a lie to the kings of Israel. Yet will I bring her into thee, O inhabitants of Moresh. He shall come unto Adullam, the glory of Israel. And Adullam means refuge. And said, make thee bald and poll thee for thy delicate children. Enlarge thy baldness as an eagle, for they are gone into captivity from thee. That is really hard to understand. Does that make sense? I mean, is that about right? But that's really hard to understand just reading it, because you don't know what in the world he is talking about there until you understand what he's doing with the play on words there on their names and making puns there. Anyone have any questions? And we're going now to chapter 2. And it says here in the lesson, it says, it's on our lesson, it says Micah's warning to the evildoers. And it said, verse 1 through 5 says, woe to them that devise iniquity and work evil upon their beds, when it is morning is light. They practice it because it is in the power of their hand. And they covet fields, and they take them by violence, and houses they take them away. So they oppress a man in his house, even a man in his heritage. Therefore thus saith the Lord, behold, against this family I do devise an evil, from which ye shall not remove your necks, neither shall ye go haughtily, for this time is evil. And in that day shall one take up a parable against you, and lament with a doleful lamentation, and say, we be utterly spoiled. He hath changed the portion of my people. How hath he removed it from me? Turning away, he hath divided our fields. Therefore shalt thou have none that shall cast a cord by the lot of the congregation of the Lord. So they were doing the same thing all the pagan nations were doing. They were taking advantage of the people they could. They were taking their land. They were taking their families. They were doing everything that everybody around them was doing at that time. And they should have been a nation apart, set apart by God and following God. But they were doing everything that everybody else was, that we've studied in the past few weeks, even back to when Scott was teaching. All the nations around there, they were mistreating their people. Taking their land, taking their cattle, taking their family, their wives, their children, or whatever it was. So they were doing all these same things. And there's some things that we'll get into with the prophets and the things like that they were doing that even resembles things that was going on in Jesus' time as well. But it says, Micah pronounced a solemn warning of woe to the people of Judah for their sins and covetousness and materialism. And the fact that God detests covetousness and materialism is one of Micah's prominent themes in the first 3 chapters here. So we're going now to verse 6. And it says, prophesy ye not, say say to them that prophesy, they shall prophesy to them that they shall not take shame. So that's basically what it's saying here. It says they're not going to tell them anything that would cause them shame, anything that would cause them to think anything they were doing was wrong. It says, "O thou that are named of the house of Jacob, is the Spirit of the Lord straitened? Are these his doings? Do not my words do good to him that walketh uprightly? Even of late my people is risen up as an enemy. You pull off the robe with the garment from them that pass by securely as men averse from war. The women of my people ye cast out from their pleasant houses, from their children, and have ye taken away my glory forever. Arise ye and depart, for this is not your rest, because it is polluted. It shall destroy you, even with a sore destruction. If a man walking in the spirit and falsehood do lie, saying, I will prophesy unto thee of wine and of strong drink, he shall be the prophet of his people." So false prophets spoke only that which the people wanted to hear, which says in your lesson there in the part B right there. It said, Micah responded by reminding the house of Jacob that the Spirit of the Lord is not restricted or straitened by the optimistic speeches of false prophets. After all, God's words, as spoken by the true prophets, do good to those who walk uprightly. And the prophets' failure to warn people and to call them to repentance robbed them of their opportunity to avoid Assyrian oppression. Because of false prophets, the Assyrians would cast mothers out of their homes and would take away their children. And it says the false prophets preached a message of rest and safety that made the people more comfortable with their sin, and it just, everybody was comfortable. Everybody felt like they was doing good, and nobody felt like they were doing anything wrong. Everybody was comfortable because they were telling them what they wanted to hear, and they gave them no warning whatsoever of anything that they were doing was wrong or would cause any kind of judgment or anything would come upon them, because they were being told everything was good, you know. So, you got any questions? I think we have a lot of that going on in our time still too. People just telling you what sounds good and what you want to hear, and our whole television and everything we get is sound bites. We get sound bites, this, and this, and that's usually as deep as anybody goes into anything. You hear something on the news, they give you a 5-second sound bite of it, of this is what's going on. That's not necessarily the truth, you know. It's just whatever they want to tell us, and we get it in little short pieces, and our whole, I'm as bad as anybody. Everything's got to be in a hurry, and I want to do everything as fast as I can. So I take that sound bite sometimes for the truth, and it's not, you know. And I never look into it any to see if that's the truth or not. And I'd say probably most people are like that way. They don't. Nobody looks into anything. They just take the first thing they hear. And unfortunately, we get a lot of false prophets. We get a lot of people telling us things that are not true, and they feel like the more you repeat it, the truer it gets, I guess. It's like it doesn't have to be true, it just has to be repeatable. And that's kind of what I feel like we live in, is it doesn't have to be true, it's just got to be repeatable. And as long as you can repeat it, it'll eventually turn into the truth, I guess. But that's what I feel like what we get is just repeatable stuff. But everybody likes to have something to, in our time, something to justify a decision, and we all do that. There's a fancy word for it, Scott said, and I can't remember. Parallel bias, is that right? Is that what he said? But there's a word for it. If you're looking to justify what you think, you only, without even knowing it, you look for something to justify that. You don't look for a opposition of it, you know, because you're looking to justify what you're saying, and it's nothing new, as we can see here from this time. They've been doing that all along. Even in Micah's time here with the house of Israel, all of them, what they were doing the same thing. They were telling each other the stuff they wanted to hear. In verse 12, getting into that now. Verse 12 and 13 says, I will surely assemble, O Jacob, all of thee. I will surely gather the remnant of Israel. I will put them together as the sheep of Basra, and as the flock in the midst of their fold. They shall make great noise by reason of the multitude of men. The breaker has come up before them. They have broken up and have passed through the gate and are gone out by it. And their king shall pass before them, and the Lord on the head of them. So this is one of the few other times. The rest of them is going to be past chapter 3, but this is one of the times where in Micah that is predicting the children of Israel to come back together. It'll get on into Micah predicting the coming of Christ, and it's and talking about those things. But this is one spot here in verse 12 where they do have hope that they will says gather a remnant of Israel. It was 1950 6 or 8 when Israel became a nation again.
48.
Huh? 40?
Yeah, 48.
48? But it's still, I've looked at the map like Scott gave us, and I talked to the preacher about it. I still wonder how big Israel really was at the beginning compared to what it is now. I know it's not nowhere near the same size now is what they were at the beginning, and if it'll ever get back to that same size, will it go back? Will they own all the land back to where they was from the beginning?
Probably not until the millennium.
Yeah.
Millennial reign.
But they've lost so much land though and stuff over the years and years and years. They just it's down where it looks very small, but there's still something I think everyone knows what a powerful nation they are, as small as they are, and everyone's still concerned with Israel. If it was anybody else, they wouldn't be concerned a bit. There's a lot bigger nations that people are a lot less afraid of than they are of Israel. So I think everyone still respects Israel a lot. I'd heard something about something going on recently with Saudi Arabia was aligning themselves with Israel or something like that. I hadn't looked into it. It's just, like I said, one of those things that pop up. So I haven't researched it, so I can't say it's true or anything like that. But a lot of nations make it a point to align themselves with Israel. The United States used to be really, really strong in alliance with them, and I don't know where the United States stands now compared to the way we used to be. It seemed like during Reagan's time we were really tight with Israel. We was a really strong alliance with Israel, and George Bush Sr. we were really tight with Israel then. I think that's a side, and on Bobby Ederholt used to preach on this and talk about it a lot. Is being on the side of them is always a good thing. Does anyone have any other questions before we go into chapter 3? So let's go 1 through 4 here. The lesson says, and I said, hear, I pray you, O heads of Jacob, and you princes of the house of Israel. Is it not for you to know judgment, who hate the good and love the evil, who pluck off their skin from off them and their flesh from off their bones, who also eat the flesh of my people and flay their skin from off them, and they break their bones and chop them in pieces as for the pot and as flesh within the cauldron. Then shall they cry unto the Lord, but he will not hear them. He will even hide his face from them at that time, as they have behaved themselves ill in their doings. And it says, in contrast to Israel's future millennial king, who will care for his people like a shepherd, the leaders of Israel in Micah's day did not know judgment or justice. Instead, they hated good and loved evil. And Micah opened their injustices to a ravenous animal devouring sheep because of the maltreatment, and God would not deliver their leaders from their deportation. That's pretty gruesome description there in those in verse 2 and 2 and 3 of having their skin removed. It's pretty gruesome. It said, and then in verse 5 through 8 it says, "Thus says the Lord concerning the prophets that make the people err, that bite with their teeth and cry, peace, and he that putteth not into their mouth, they even prepare war against them. Therefore night shall be upon you, that ye shall not have a vision, and it shall be dark unto you, that ye shall not divine, and the sun shall go down over the prophets, and the day shall be dark over them. Then shall the seers be ashamed, and the diviners confounded. Yea, they shall all cover their lips, for there is no answer of God. But truly I am full of power by the Spirit of the Lord, and the judgment of the mighty, to declare unto Jacob his transgressions, and to Israel his sin." So, even what does Jesus say about false prophets? Even in our time, it says to not lead the little ones astray, to not, and that's basically what we would be, is if we were teaching children wrong or teaching people wrong, we would be false prophets. We'd be leading people astray. So this shows more of the I guess what would you say, goodness, the word just left my brain. But anyhow, the thoughts of God, how God's always been, how He's always looked at things. He's always disliked false prophets because it leads people astray, leads people in the wrong direction, and we're told about this several times through the Bible. Even the New Testament is to don't be a false prophet, don't lead people astray. You will be judged for it. As even God's chosen people here, they will be judged for leading people astray. Very scary though to be any kind of teacher, or preacher, or anything. Very scary to do that, and I hope somebody will catch me if I ever say anything, to catch me, and I don't. If I'm wrong, please say something, because I don't want to say something wrong. You know, I'm not by any stretch of imagination the smartest person in here, and I don't ever pretend to be. So. But it's a very serious thing, is to lead someone astray. All right, and then we'll go through verses 9 through 12, and it said, "Hear this, I pray ye heads of the house of Jacob, and princes of the house of Israel, that abhor judgment and pervert all equity. They build up Zion with blood, and Jerusalem with iniquity. The heads thereof judge for reward, and the priests thereof teach for hire, and the prophets thereof divine for money. Yet they will lean upon the Lord and say, Is not the Lord among us? None evil can come upon us. Therefore shall Zion for your sake be plowed as a field, and Jerusalem shall become heaps as in the mountains of the house of the high places of the forest." So that sums up the whole lesson right there, in pretty much the last two verses there, talking about how they teach for hire, get paid to teach. They teach someone, teach whatever they're teaching, but they're getting paid for it, and teaching everyone wrong. But the prophets divine for money. That means they're giving their prophecy for money. People are paying them to tell them what they want to hear. So, and even if you think it's not serious, this isn't a terrible country that Assyria, or whoever you want to call them, that detest God and went after God. Jerusalem and as it says Zion and Jerusalem there in verse 12. This is who he's talking to. Does anybody have anything to add or anything? Any questions that we can go over? I don't even know what time.
Why did God want him to use puns?
Puns, and I don't, and it says that in the lesson there, it says God inspired puns, but the only thing I can figure is the people during that time, names, if you know, through all the other lessons and things that we've studied, names mean a lot. It means, even like with Abram and Abraham, how names mean a lot. Well, those people during that time, they probably understood that a lot, and that would cut you to the bone, like if they said Wayne had to make him a wagon wheel to get out of town in a hurry, you know, or something like that. Just that would probably cut them pretty hard, knowing that it was almost a prophecy against you that you lived up to your name or something like that, I guess, because names were so important. Does that sound about right? Because names and titles were so important, I guess, and names of the cities, names of people, and everything like that had a lot of meaning to them.
It's something that would catch their attention.
Yeah.
That they would remember,
Yeah.
like Jesus' parables.
Yeah. It's like one of I got a great one of mine has always been, I do not want to drown, because it's going to say Wayne swims or drowns in the newspaper, and I don't. that could be the worst thing that would happen to me. So I don't want to drown. So.
That little thing in the beginning where it says about the person that was, the thief.
Yeah.
And he said, I have no money to buy the diggers to make the Van Gogh.
Yeah.
So he's saying he didn't have any gas. He didn't have any money to buy the gas to make this getaway.
Yep.
Is the reason he got caught.
Yep.
But he uses Monet and,
Yeah.
and Van Gogh.
Yep. I think mine actually, I read that, but I don't think it's in my picture book, what you're reading, but I did read it. Yeah.
Mhm.
The lesson next week. Lesson next week should be in chapter 4. Yeah, 4 through 7. Micah, I'm gonna finish today. This will get it more into the prophecy of end times and things like that in chapter 4 through 7. You want to have anything else to add? No, we'll close with a word of prayer. Heavenly Father, Lord, I thank you again for this day and for the opportunity to come here today, Lord, to study your word. Thank you for all those in attendance, Lord, and ask you to please be with us as we go through the worship service, and may we bring honor and glory to you in all we do and say. And it's in Christ's name I pray. Amen.